Welcome to Florida's Cannabis News Podcast, a weekly podcast exploring the legal, political, and economic changes to Florida's cannabis industry, covering important news and events for Florida cannabis businesses and professionals. Sit back and relax. Florida's Cannabis News Podcast begins now.
Good morning and happy Friday. Today is March 22nd, 2019, and you're tuned into Florida's Cannabis News Podcast. This is your host, David, and I'm here every Friday covering the latest news and events at Florida's cannabis industry. Today we have another news-filled episode, so let's dive right into this week's top stories. This week's top story comes out of Tallahassee, where after a landslide vote of 101 to 11 last week, Governor DeSantis signed SB 182 into law on Monday, March 18th, and on Thursday, March 21st, Trulieve became Florida's first MMTC to sell whole flower. Today's top story will be a combination of SB 182 being signed into law and 3 days later, Trulieve making the first sale of whole flower. The new law allows registered medical cannabis patients to purchase whole flower from medical marijuana treatment centers, but patients might have to wait a little bit longer before they can purchase whole flower. SB 182 does take effect immediately, but it could take time for the Department of Health to approve the new rules to guide doctors and the MMTCs themselves. The DOH is the agency that oversees Florida's medical cannabis program, and we have a full breakdown of SB 182 in last week's episode, so be sure to listen to that if you haven't yet. But it could take weeks or even months before rules are circulated to make smokable medical cannabis available at state-approved dispensaries. Though the DOH has not released rules for the MMTCs to follow to sell whole flower cannabis, Trulieve became the first MMTC to make a sale of whole flower. The sale took place at its Tallahassee location to Douglas Dixon, who's a patient who since using medical cannabis has gone off 15 pharmaceutical prescriptions. How did this all happen? Well, Trulieve is following the letter of the law as laid out in Senate Bill 182. Reading from SB 182, quote, "Upon request, the Department of Health, may grant a medical marijuana treatment center a variance from the representations made in its initial application. Consideration of such request shall be based upon the individual facts and circumstances surrounding the request, essentially a case-by-case basis. So in order to sell whole flower, Florida MMTCs had to apply for a variance with the Department of Health, which outlines the details of the smokable products they plan to offer. So Trulieve applied for a variance, and it was conditionally approved. In addition, the packaging and processes Trulieve used to sell the whole flower were already based on a system set up in the law prior to the rules being written and approved. The registry still needs updating, and the rules in final approved form also need to be completed. But Trulieve here was highly proactive and worked with the Office of Medical Marijuana Use for this temporary fix, since the law went into effect immediately upon Governor DeSantis signing. This legal proactive approach is why Trulieve has 65% of the market in Florida. Not all MMTCs in Florida pre-submitted their variances to sell flower. Sutera Wellness, another MMTC, submitted its product application with the Department of Health on Thursday and anticipates the Department of Health's decision in the coming days. We should see more and more patients gaining access to smokable flower in the coming weeks. We'll also keep track of how other medical marijuana treatment centers follow in the footsteps of Trulieve as their smokable cannabis flower become approved by the Florida Department of Health. As some may know, the Department of Health has a reputation for moving at a slow pace when it comes to issuing rules. It took the Department of Health more than a year to issue rules on medical cannabis after voters approved the constitutional amendment in 2016, and remember, they still haven't issued rules on edibles, the second most popular delivery method of medical cannabis. Floridians are supposed to have edibles by law, but we have no rules. We have the law in place, but the Department of Health still hasn't crafted the necessary regulations for the medical marijuana treatment centers to follow, which is a little bit concerning. So patients don't expect whole flower sales immediately. Kim Rivers, CEO of Trulieve, stated that, quote, "We anticipate an expedited process from the governor and the Department of Health as it relates to the approval of smokable whole flower cannabis," close quote. The Department of Health has its work cut out for it. They need to release rules for the MMTCs to follow to sell the whole flower. Then the Department of Health has to have the rules approved. The computer programs in the MMTCs need to be updated so it allows bud tenders when they get into the registry to see grams of whole flower along with milligrams of THC information about the new product. Late on Monday night, March 18th, the Department of Health sent an email to qualified physicians in the state, which gave content for doctors to learn about recommending the new delivery method. But patients also have their work cut out for them. This is a different route of administration the legislator just introduced, so patients will have to go back to their doctor and have him or her set up another recommendation for whole flower. But this recommendation puts a big burden on the doctors because it includes new information. For example, they have to include why smoking whole flower is the most effective way to utilize it. And who knows, doctors may actually charge patients more in the future if they want whole flower recommendations. We'll see what happens. Patients can still purchase glass and rolling papers and other paraphernalia they need to consume the flower outside of the medical marijuana treatment centers. The passing of SB 182 was very efficient for the legislator's standards. The legislator wanted this to be the first law signed in this session, and it was. There was no press conference at the signing, but Ron DeSantis might have a ceremonial signing later, at a later date. We will see. SB 182 is the first of DeSantis' short tenure and an early legislative victory. These two stories come from a bunch of articles that were written in the news this week. Head on over to Jeffrey Schreer's article in the Tallahassee Democrat for a lot of the details, and also Justine's Griffin article in the Tampa Bay Times. Both will be linked below in the show notes. Our second top story of the week comes out of Jacksonville, where Cresco Labs Incorporated, one of the largest vertically integrated multi-state cannabis operators in the United States, announced that it is entering the Florida market by acquiring VidaCann, which is one of the largest and most advanced providers of medical cannabis in Florida. VidaCann currently operates 7 dispensaries in Florida: Bradenton, Deerfield Beach, Holly Hill, Orlando, Palm Bay, St. Petersburg, and Tampa, and VidaCann expects to have 14 dispensaries open by the end of June 2019. The deal provides Cresco Labs with VidaCann's MMTC license to grow, process, manufacture, distribute, and dispense the company's house of branded products in the state of Florida. VidaCann also has additional dispensary locations in Tallahassee, Bonita Springs, and Port Charlotte that are completed and just pending operation approval. Their Jacksonville, West Palm, Miami, and Pensacola locations are currently under construction and currently scheduled to open by the end of June 2019. VidaCann is projected to have about 20 dispensaries in the state by the end of 2019, while Cresco intends to further accelerate the VidaCann retail dispensary rollout. Dispensary locations are strategically located throughout the state to ensure 95% of the population of Florida is within 50 miles of a VidaCann dispensary. VidaCann does deliver statewide to all licensed patients. Cresco Labs also gets a fully operational greenhouse cultivation facility with a state-of-the-art processing and analytical lab, meeting all FDA requirements. Charlie Batchel, Cresco Labs CEO, said, quote, "Since relaunching its cannabis program in 2017, Florida has seen tremendous growth in patient registration and is one of the most important markets in the country. VidaCann is the perfect blend of an established operational footprint and infrastructure of professionals that will allow Cresco to execute its disciplined and strategic Florida plan expeditiously." Close quote. We have nearly 200,000 registered patients in the state. Upon 200,000 patients, VidaCann will have the ability to increase its dispensaries to 35. Head on over to newcannabisventures.com for all the details. Our last top story of the week comes out of Cocoa Beach, where city officials voted this week to decriminalize possession of small amounts of cannabis. By a 3-2 vote, Cocoa Beach officials have authorized police to issue civil citations if the officers deem fit to suspects caught with 20 grams of cannabis or less. This week, the Cocoa Beach City Commission approved the ordinance's second and final reading before a standing room only crowd. The ordinance creates a citation process to punish people caught with small amounts of cannabis or drug paraphernalia. Mayor Ben Malik, who proposed the ordinance, said, quote, "This is where the plan is heading, and many cities across the country have already decriminalized," close quote. Not all officials were on Ben Malik's side. Police Chief Scott Rosenfeld voiced concerns about the cannabis ordinance to the commissioners. He said his officers would not save time by writing civil citations rather than making arrests. There's a mixed reactions from city officials, but the vote is in. Cocoa Beach has decriminalized possession of small amounts of cannabis. Head on over to Rick Neal's article in Florida Today for all the details. As a reminder, we have all of the news we cover on our Twitter account, which is @_FL Cannabis News, and linked below in the show notes for your convenience. Something I thought we should throw into the episode every week is a update from the Office of Medical Marijuana Use. Just the qualified patients number. Right now we're at 194,997, very close to that 200,000 mark. So every week I'll come with an update about the number of qualified patients. Those are the top stories of the week. Let's move into upcoming events. This Saturday, March 23rd, in the city of Melbourne, the Medical Resource Association Incorporated is hosting an event called Rethink Green, a patient, caregiver information and educational session with Doug and Jan Bench. The event will be held from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. at Crown Plaza on the beach, 2605 North Highway A1A, Melbourne Beach, Florida, 32903. It looks like it's going to be a general discussion to learn how to get registered as a qualified patient, just to learn and learn more about cannabis and understanding cannabis as a medicine. Next Thursday, March 28th, Wild Ginger in Sarasota will be hosting a medical marijuana talk with Dr. Fred Harvey. The event will be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Wild Ginger Studio and Lounge, 6553 Superior Avenue, Sarasota, Florida, 34231. Looks like the event is going to talk about medical cannabis in general, what is involved in getting a license in Florida, how can CBD options support you without a prescription. Should be a good time. Dr. Fred Harvey has been in practice for over 30 years. He's triple board certified, and he knows a lot about cannabis as a medicine. So go on and check it out if you're in the Sarasota area. This Sunday, March 24th, from noon to 2 p.m., Knox Medical is having a free educational event hosted by Dr. Michelle Weiner to provide medical marijuana patients with a deeper understanding of medical cannabis and pain. The North Miami Beach location is 175 Northwest 167th Street, Miami, Florida 33169. I've personally attended 3 lectures of Dr. Michelle Weiner's in the South Florida area. She's very good public speaker and very knowledgeable about the plant, so I definitely recommend going out to this event if you have the time. That's it for Florida's top cannabis news and events. If you have any stories or events to share, head on over to our Twitter account @_FL Cannabis News or email us at floridacannabisnewspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for staying up to date with Florida's cannabis industry. I'll be back with you again next Friday for another news-filled episode of Florida's Cannabis News Podcast. Have a great weekend.